Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and this is an episode focused on the AWP, how to prepare for it, what to do when you're there. I'll tell you a little bit about my panel and some of the panels that I went to, and just cover what you need to know, because there is a lot that you need to know. So let's start with preparation. Once I knew that my panel was accepted, double exposure, writing, submitting, and publishing in literary and mainstream outlets with Dennis James Sweeney, Dion Ford, and Katie Henkin Robinson of Electric Literature, I started preparing the moderator rate for the conference. And then I also booked the hotel, because hotels get overbooked, which I know that happened to a few people. I did a little research and I saw that the Hyatt Regency had a skywalk, and you don't know if it's going to be cold or what the weather's going to be like in March in Baltimore. So I thought, okay, this is one way that I wouldn't have to wear a coat. As it turns out, the skywalk was closed for construction, but luckily the weather wasn't too cold in Baltimore. So I did a post thinking, what am I going to wear, right? And people gave me all sorts of suggestions, but one of the main suggestions was Bloomingdale's or Nordstrom or even Nordstrom Rack. And I ended up ordering a couple of dresses online, because I always like to wear dresses for the panels that I moderate or that I'm on. And this is my 3rd time at AWP that I've either been on a panel or moderated a panel. And last year I missed AWP in LA because I was in Boston giving my TEDx talk. So in terms of preparation, I looked to get a dress and I decided on getting a sweater dress. And in fact, I ended up wearing a dress from Tahari. And it was very comfortable, and it did a couple of things. It protected me in case the room was cold, which conference rooms are often very cold. So wearing this sweater dress was really helpful, and I had a sweater to go with it. And I also wanted to pack very lightly because I booked to go on Amtrak. I didn't want to drive. I'm not a big long distance driver. It wasn't feasible to fly. It just wasn't practical. So I booked Amtrak, and I wanted to carry light because last year I had a frozen shoulder, and it took a while to get over that with physical therapy, and I just wanted to book light. So I basically wore sneakers and a Spanx kind of sweatsuit. And I know Spanx sounds weird because it's like the pantyhose, but they have really cute and not too expensive sweatsuits. So it was a matching top and a bottom. And so I wore that with sneakers on the train. And I packed a pair of flat boots because, again, going to the conferences, you walk a lot. And then I brought a pair of tights. Since my dress was blue and white and I had black boots and black sweater, I brought blue tights to kind of match the dress. And I figured that would cover that. And I also brought an extra dress, and that extra dress was from Miss Sook. That's online. And it was a sweater dress as well. And then I brought three sweaters and just one pair of black jeans. So I figured I would wear that with the boots, or I could wear it with the sneakers. And the sweaters I brought was a red sweater, which I ended up not wearing, a gray sweater with a little bit of lace around the neck, which was comfortable to walk around on Thursday. My panel was on Friday at 10:35. So I figured I got there Wednesday evening, like late afternoon, and I would walk around on Thursday, and Friday is really the panel in the morning, and then relax or do whatever because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And the parties I relegated for Friday. I went to an electric lit cocktail hour, and I went to an open secrets party at night. And they had delicious cookies. The other thing that I did in terms of preparation is I have been to the conferences where I have big group dinners with like 20 people. And I find it very hard to hold a conversation. If you've listened to my TED Talk, How to Get Noticed in Your Writing and Beyond, I talk about that I'm hearing impaired and that sometimes it's really difficult to hold these conversations. People wouldn't normally know it, but I think it's harder when it's a huge, huge group of people. And I like the smaller conversations and really getting to know the writers. So I asked two writers that had been on my podcast and that I knew from talking to them and social media and from meeting one of them a while ago to meet me for dinner. So Heather Sweeney of the brilliant book Camouflage memoir, How I Emerged from the Shadows of a Military Marriage. And I met on Wednesday night and had such a lovely time and really got to know each other a lot better. And Amanda McCracken, who wrote the brilliant memoir When Longing Becomes Your Lover, it's Memoir Plus. And so we met on Thursday night and also had a lovely time and really got to know each other. And I think it's important to be a literary citizen. So you're reaching out to people before the conference. You're already commenting on people's posts. You're already commenting on social media. So I think that was important. So getting back to the preparation, I did another post on Facebook, which is sort of my go-to these days. I don't know, it just feels kind of restricted and safe, and it's the people that I choose to be with me. And I asked what people were bringing because I don't know about you, but I get hungry during a conference and I want to make sure that I have the food, that I have the snacks, that I have some protein. And so I posted asking for some recommendations. And shout out to Jody Sadowski because she recommended Star-Kissed Lunch to Go. And I literally ordered 20 of them and I brought three. And I think two lunches, the lunch on Thursday and the lunch after my panel, I had this. And what it is it doesn't need to be refrigerated. It's tuna salad packed in water. It's a ton of protein. It's 19 grams of protein, which I always am looking for protein, and 7 grams of sugar. And it comes with, this is so cool. It comes with a spoon. It comes with reduced calorie mayo and sweet relish. And I just mixed it together in this little bowl and they give a spoon and I ate it. So while people were spending a fortune at the lunch places around, I did that. Other food things, I just want to do a little shout out popcorn. So I love Lesser Evil because they are low in sodium, 170 grams of sodium, and they have the little packets. Then you can also get Skinny Pop. And the other thing I did, and I think Allison K. Williams was the one who recommended to bring a refillable water bottle. So I did a couple of things. I did my branding because I teach at NYU. And so I brought my lightest water bottle. We had a lot of heavy ones. I have a teenager in the house, and she has heavy, heavy water bottles. And I was like, no, I need a light water bottle. So I brought this one. And in the Hyatt, they had a fountain of water with lime and lemon, and they also had a little lemonade. So every day I would fill my bottle and I would add a drop of lemonade, and I was good to go. And this is a great container to do that. So that I did. The other thing I did is I got Kind bars, and these are great because I'm a chocoholic. People know that. And I got dark chocolate nuts and sea salt. And I know some people are allergic to nuts, and so you have to be careful eating anything with nuts. But you could eat these easily in your room. You could stash them in your bag for when you need them and when you have those moments alone, and then wash your hands and be careful and brush your teeth. I always bring a toothbrush with me. And instead of my electric toothbrush, I collect the toothbrushes that I get every time I go to the dentist. And so here was one that I brought with me because no one needs to hear your electric toothbrush going off in your luggage, whether you're on a plane or traveling on a train. Okay. The other thing that I did was I brought a little bit of branding with me. So I ordered from Vistaprint literally 2 weeks before the conference. I realized I was very low on business cards. And I know you're going to say, oh, business cards, they're so 2000, whatever. Honestly, business cards are great. When my book, Writing That Gets Noticed, came out, my publisher set up a QR code which I was then able to put on a business card. And I highly recommend that. So I did a business card, said NYU, adjunct professor, editor, TEDx speaker, website, Estelle Erasmus, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and my Substack, little picture of the book. And on the other side, I have Freelance Writing Direct with my email and the podcast link from my website. So when I did my session, I had these cards out, and originally the publisher made these bigger cards, and I thought, I'm not going to bring them, they're heavy. I'll just bring my business cards. And afterwards, there was a line for people who wanted to speak with me and get more information about the classes that I teach and the sessions that I do. And so I handed out about half of the cards that I had ordered. So I love that I had that handy. The other thing I did is when my book came out, I made these little notebooks that said Writing That Gets Noticed on them. And I had a Writing That Gets Noticed, can't really see it, pen, and I had my little notepad. So again, it's another branding thing. Now, when I've gone to other conferences before that I've had book signings, and this time I didn't bring my book because again, it was heavy. I didn't want to bring it. I didn't want to ship anything. But when I spoke at the Writer's Digest conference in New York, when my book came out, or 2024, I had these little things made and they have like a little light on them. So I'm able to put them behind me and they're very lightweight, but I wouldn't travel with them on a train. But if you're driving somewhere, so I had them made, I would stick them behind me if I'm speaking or signing books. And it was a great little thing to have. In preparation My phone is pretty good with battery power, but you could always get one of these little battery power things that have attachments from the wall to charge and that go into your devices. And there's a wide variety of them. So that's preparation. Part of going to these conferences, as I mentioned before, is being a good literary citizen. It's supporting people, it's talking to people, it's making sure that you're there. And one of the ways you can do that is also through mentoring. And I've been a mentor for the AWP Writer Mentor Program for, I think, I've done this 3 seasons now, and I was in the winter program. And I love it because it's a way of giving back to writers who are either starting out or just don't have the same opportunities and don't have the schedule availability. So I love doing that. And my recent mentee was Julia Beckman, and she's a terrific writer, and you'll be hearing more from her, I'm sure. And the other part of being a good literary citizen is sharing the work. Obviously, I have Freelance Writing Direct, which has over 180 episodes, and I love doing that. But it's also sharing what people are doing, and I love to do that as well on my website and through social media. Now, when you're there, it's about socializing and networking. And I'm not saying you have to be crazy and wildly extroverted. I actually think I was more extroverted before the pandemic, and I have that both sides of that. But what I did do is when I went to a party or an event, I would look for one person who was kind of standing by themselves or in transit somewhere, just sort of looking around. And I would go and start a conversation with that person because it's easier sometimes than just like going and inserting yourself into a group. I've done that too, but that sometimes works real well. And I always loved it when people would come up to me and say, hey, I feel like I know you from the podcast, or I've seen your writing, or I've seen your webinars for Writer's Digest, or your editor on call events for NYU, or I've taken a course with you, or I saw you speak at Hippocamp or Irma Bombeck. So I love that. And I had quite a few people who did that, who came up to me during the conference, and it was really enjoyable. And let's not forget, you will meet people just in weird ways, like waiting online to get coffee or going to the bathroom. The bathroom is a big one. And I want to give a shout out to Brittany, who is a healthcare, I guess, practitioner from New York and Florida. She's both, and she was so friendly in the bathroom. And I was about to go in the stall, and she said, "Oh, let me share my profile on Instagram." And it was too hard for me to scrounge in my bag and pull out my phone, but I thought she had followed me on Instagram because I wasn't able to do the share profile thing on Instagram. Anyway, she came to my panel because I told her about it, and she asked a question. And Brittany, reach out to me if you're watching this, because I was looking for you and I don't have your last name, and I was trying to find you to continue our conversation. Okay, the panels. So my panel, Double Exposure, Writing, Submitting, and Publishing in Literary and Mainstream Outlets, with Katie Henkin Robinson of Electric Lit, Dennis James Sweeney of How to Submit, who was on my podcast, and Dion Ford of Go Back and Get It, who will be on my podcast. What happened is the way it came about, and I talked about this at the beginning of our panel session, because I'm always curious, how did a panel originate? What happened with it? And I said that when Dennis was on the program, and he was the submissions editor for Entropy, and he wrote the book about how to submit. And he's focused primarily on literary publications. And Dion is hybrid, and Katie is editor for Electric Lit. And I've done some literary, including Electric Lit and Brevity and Hippocampus magazine, but I also am primarily a consumer, mainstream, with over 150 bylines to my credit since I started publishing in the 90s. So it was a real fascinating panel, and I made sure that I did my preparation. When you're a moderator, you want to open in a way that's interesting. So I did talk about the origin of the panel, and I had this idea, and I said, it's sort of like the combination of peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter, let's say that's literary and it's delicious, but if you combine it with jelly, that could really elevate it. And so bringing the two together, the literary markets and consumer, is really elevating and adding a tool to your toolkit, which everybody wants to add tools to their toolkit. So a couple of things that came out of the panel is Dion shared that the pieces she writes for mainstream outlets are often sparked by something happening in the world right now. There's a timeliness to them, and it's connected to the cultural moment. And when she writes for literary journals, she often has more space to be reflective and exploratory. And Dennis James Sweeney talked about the difference in process. Literary journal pieces are often written first and then submitted, while mainstream pieces are frequently written after a pitch has been accepted. Often, an editor for mainstream will also want to see the completed essay because it's often in the execution. But some editors, and this is becoming a trend that I've noticed, really do want to see the pitch first to see if it's even something that they're going to want to look at. We discussed submission strategy, and Dennis emphasized something that I think writers need to hear more often, which is that publishing should be joyful and sustainable rather than driven purely by prestige. And so it's important to look at publications that resonate with you and the community you want to be a part of. And Katie talked about the importance of making sure that the piece is clear and understandable to the editor. And sometimes a piece could maybe have lovely writing, but if it's missing the point, that's something that needs to be enhanced and looked at. Katie talked about what piece is good for electric literature as opposed to mainstream outlet. And she said a strongly written essay that is based around telling an interesting story, where the story itself is foregrounded and the narrator's emotional trajectory is backgrounded, is more often going to be a fit for a mainstream outlet than electric lit. So if she's flying through an essay, eating it up because it's a well-written and captivating story, but then she feels that there's so much about the narrator and the emotional journey and experience that she doesn't feel she understands, that doesn't quite work. And they do not long form nonfiction. So they take essays up to 6,500 words, and they're really looking for essays that take the time to take the reader in unexpected directions and don't shy away from anything over a tight essay that leaves corners of the self unexplored. One of the things I talked about is I always encourage writers to aim high. I recently had a student publish in Modern Love with an essay called Negotiating the End of Us. And she developed that essay in my class, and she would never have submitted it there if she hadn't been encouraged to try. I said, you've got to send this to Modern Love when I thought it was ready to submit. And it's a fabulous piece. And I did an episode on that. I also attended just a few other panels when I was there. Again, the morning of my panel, I made sure that I was reviewing my notes, reviewing the questions that I was going to ask the panelists. And so I didn't really focus too much on that. But on Thursday, I attended a panel on writing from history that Joanna Rakoff, who's also been a guest on the podcast, was on with Julia Dahl Estelle and I think Elizabeth Silver. And I thought that was really useful because a lot of times if people are writing memoir or even writing fiction, they're taking information from pop culture, from history, and incorporating it into the work. Another panel that I went to was Beth Ann Fennelly was on it, and she's been a guest on the podcast. She was actually my 150th guest. And it was talking about failure, which is how writers, no matter what, you always feel that there's something more that you can do. And maybe you have to kind of accept that you can fail, but you just keep going. And I think the writers that have the most grit are the ones that keep going, keep persevering, tweak it, pivot it, figure out where it can go. So it's a reminder that there are many, many different paths in the writing life. So my panel was standing room only, which was wonderful because so many writers got an opportunity to hear from myself and the panelists, and the questions. The room was electric. The question and answer session was wonderful. And when I talk about giving back, afterwards, I didn't have my credit card with me, and I tried to use cash to get the coffee in the conference center. And of course, I couldn't use cash. And so I was struggling with Apple Wallet because it was the first time I was using that. And a writer saw me struggling, and she said, "Listen, let me take care of your coffee. I really enjoyed your panel." And that was just so fulfilling. That's really giving it back. And the coffee was delicious. And yes, I did accept her kind and generous offer. I also want to say from my panel, I have a resource guide based on links and essays and things that were mentioned during the discussion. And that's on my website, EstelleErasmus.com. Right on the front page, it says resource guide from AWP 2026. So I recommend everyone look for that. The other thing I'm going to say is at the end of the conference, follow up. Make sure that, the cards that you get, you're not losing, you're holding on to them. I walked the bookstore, but I wasn't able to spend as much time as I would have wanted to, but I did have some very nice and fulfilling conversations. And I got to see Melissa Federigo, The Perils of Girlhood, sign her book and be in a picture. And that was really cool. And I talked to other people who were there with their books and their publications. And of course, I stopped by Poets and Writers because they named Writing That Gets Noticed the best book for writers. So I had to say hello there. And finally, in terms of follow up, I met someone lovely on the train who was sitting right next to me. And all I said to her was, "Are you headed to Baltimore?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "AWP?" And she said, "Yes." And we had a lovely conversation, and we're absolutely going to keep in touch. And one of the clever things I saw was Heather Sweeney brought my book with her when we went to dinner and asked me to sign it. And I was honored to do so, and I signed it. And she did a post after the conference showing a group of the books that she had put in her car and brought for particular authors to sign. And she showed the books, and in another post, she showed the signings. And I thought it was a really nice way of tagging and linking and just sharing the work. So don't forget those follow-up posts, your episodes, like listening to the episode like this one. And the next AWP will be in Chicago. And we never know what's going to happen in life and schedules, but I hope if I go and if you go, you stop by and I get to see you there. So thank you for listening, and make sure you check out the resource guide and so much more coming on Freelance Writing Direct. Bye. Follow me at EstelleErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.